There we go, Brendan.
Good.
I want to thank Brendan for coming on in today. He's an insider in the shipping industry, so I just really appreciate his time, and I know all of my subscribers do. Thank you for coming on in, Brendan.
My pleasure.
So we're going to start this off simply by you and I just going back and forth, asking a few questions, talking about a few subjects, and then if we have some time, I would love to take a couple questions from the audience. So if everybody's ready to do it, we have 175 people in the house right now. I want to make sure everybody hits that thumbs up. Don't forget, there's a special guest who has devoted his time today. So I think that is really, really awesome. So we appreciate that. I know that everybody in here definitely does. All right. The prices of containers today. What were we seeing? Price of a container, I mean, depends on the route, of course, but let's talk about some of the more common ones. I mean, if you happen to know them off the top of your head, Shanghai to LA or what have you, it doesn't really matter. But in terms of what was the price back in 2019, what's the price today? The multiple at least.
Sure. So it's important to distinguish between what the spot market is doing and what beneficial cargo owners are actually able to contract their rates at. But speaking generally to what the market rates have been, traditionally in the past few years, pre-COVID, it's been around, let's take Shanghai to LA, for example. You might see a rate of around $1,500 for just the ocean freight piece. So that's just from the origin port to the destination port, $1,500 or so. Spot market rates right now in that exact same lane are $15,000.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And of course,
Pretty crazy.
there's a lot going on with this. And what been seeing, what I've been seeing is there's factors like the workers themselves. There's factors like the ships not being able to get to the port because of a holdup for some reason. There's not enough containers. Like, what can you tell us about all of the factors? And are we just seeing this whole mishmash of all these factors coming in at the exact same time, and that's causing the problem, or is there something else here?
No, you hit the nail on the head. It's a confluence of all these different issues, all permeating at once. We have a labor shortage, so that means less truck drivers, less people in receiving facilities to actually unload those containers. The volume itself has spiked because, of course, when everybody's at home in 2020, suddenly, the consumer spending trends are spiked because everybody suddenly needs a new office chair, needs a new ottoman or what have you. So spending just exploded. But meanwhile, the ability to receive all of that increased volume was significantly diminished in a number of ways. You have lockdowns, you have local restrictions on facility management and the number of people that can be in a confined space. I mean, just a whole range of issues on the receiving end. But then you have, of course, that same labor challenge at the ports themselves. So when you see 30 ships sitting off the coast of LA Long Beach, like we had a couple months ago, now it's up in Oakland, and then it'll be back in LA Long Beach, I'm sure. But when you see something like that, it's just the increased demand and the reduced ability to receive. It's really it boils down to that much.
Where, I mean, of course, interconnected with that, like we've got bottlenecks all over the place. Where do you think the biggest bottleneck is today? Is it necessarily the ports? Is it with the actual production of the products that are being shipped, or is it just kind of everywhere it is bad? I mean, is there any one that really stands out?
It's a little bit of madness on all fronts right now. Just speaking broadly in terms of general supply chain, you have suppliers that are dealing with issues of their own domestically, and then you have, of course, beneficial cargo owners with their own set of issues. But I'd say if I had to pinpoint any particular challenge right now, it's recently it's been the equipment being in the right place. So when you hear headlines about a container shortage, This isn't something that's ever traditionally happened because markets have been pretty steady. Steamship lines and other stakeholders have been able to coordinate their assets and plan around demand and really get strategic and plan around seasonality as well, in particular lanes, all the way down to um, there's definitely never been anything like it. But when rates are exploding, let's take Shanghai to LA as a great example. Um, when the rate for a shipper, if they can make $15,000 on a container going eastbound in the Pacific, but they're maybe only making a couple grand going westbound with a full container, well, it's in their best interest to forego U.S. exports and that revenue in order just to get the container back to Asia quicker so that they can use it.
Wow.
But that's created, we could talk, that's a whole other subject on what's happened to U.S. exporters. It's been pretty difficult and challenging, I can imagine, for a lot of agricultural companies and firms. But that's one of the biggest issues that you could just call out would be the imbalance of container equipment.
Right.
And now we have a shortage domestically of chassis as well, which is once it's offloaded from the ship, you've got to put it on a chassis and get it driven out. But those chassis are in short supply as well.
My goodness. All right. So already we're getting some huge details that we don't get in articles and charts and everything. So once again, everybody hit that thumbs up for Brendan. Appreciate his time and energy that he's coming on here. Really, definitely appreciate it. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously, and not enough time, but there's a whole bunch of different indicators that we look at on the channel here, whether it's the Baltic Dry Index. There's so many different types. I mean, is there any one that you would say is kind of like the king or like, the best thing to be paying attention to really have the, your finger on the pulse? Or is it, look at all of them, look at any of them, and, what kind of insight you can give me as well as my subscribers in terms of indicators?
I would say the best indicator and the best metric to track as far as it relates to container pricing and just general import pricing or export would be the Freightos Baltic Index. That's a great resource. It's free to sign up and get some good charts and graphs and data. That's a really good one. It's funny that you mentioned which one's the most reliable or dependable, though, because even the Freightos Baltic Index, until very recently, I believe about a week ago, was they were not projecting the right numbers. They themselves have bad data, which says something when one of the most reliable indexes doesn't have accurate data. It shows you just how volatile the market is. And so they recently, in the last week, made an update to their numbers, and you see the graph, it just shoots up like this. That's because they corrected their data recently.
Jeez.
It's a little bit more steady than that, but that's what it looks like on the chart because of the late entries.
Jeez. Okay.
It's a lot
Good
more
stuff.
accurate right now.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And we were talking about this offline previously, and one of the things here is, and you hear it in the news, it's that there's not enough truckers today, and that's part of the problem. And if you would kind of elaborate on what we had talked about previously, what happened, let's say 2019 compared to today as it relates to the truckers, and of course, why is this important?
Sure, absolutely. So the situation domestically with truckers has been challenging for the last 6 years, really. Carriers in, I believe it was 2015 or 16, an ELD mandate, ELD standing for electronic log device. So that's kind of where we started to see a turning point with drivers just in the marketplace and the capacity that comes with that. Less inclined to be a driver anymore. I think there's a number of factors that go into it. The ELD mandate, that disincentivized a lot of new drivers because the profitability just wasn't there as an owner operator anymore, at least not to the same degree as it was before, where you could maybe bend the rules a little bit, drive a few more miles than you typically would be allowed to. Now it's all being automatically tracked, so there's really no bending the rules. The other issue is there's a lot of people that are maybe just not interested in typical blue collar work for some reason anymore. It's strange, but in our society, it's almost like people have kind of turned their nose up to just working good, meaningful, regular, quote unquote, American jobs. People want to be Instagram influencers, and so that obviously dries up some of the marketplace there. But then, of course, on top of that, you have a lot of the seasoned veterans in the business. They're aging out. A lot of people are retiring. A lot of drivers are retiring. So you have less incentives for new drivers to come into the market and start a career in that space. And then you have a lot of the seasoned veterans that have been in the market for a long time departing. So a lot of carriers, they're struggling right now. And you can see some of them, they're throwing out some wild incentives for new drivers to come on board.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's definitely been a drop, and there hasn't been a significant pickup in new hiring.
Supply and demand right there.
That's it.
Now, while you, like maybe 5-10 minutes ago or whatever it was, we had somebody in the house saying they want to know about, in terms of Amazon, they're an Amazon seller. And of course, we were talking about that earlier, you and I. And what I want to know about is, of course, domestically in the United States, in terms of shipping. So not necessarily coming from overseas, but what are the sort of trends that we're seeing internally that have maybe that are important or that are different than what we're used to?
I mean, it depends on where you're sourcing your goods from. It's important to, I would say, have contingency plans in place. Because right now, I mean, it seems like we have a new black swan event every other week in the shipping industry. So it's quite crazy. I would say just make sure you're planning your lead times accordingly. Be prepared for potential delays. Those delays potentially could come with added costs. That's a very real thing. Make sure you're minimizing any chance you have of your shipments being flagged by customs. Make sure your documentation is in order. Any sort of delay from customs would just be salt on an open wound at this point for any sort of importer. Have some contingency plans in place. Start thinking about maybe some other suppliers that, potentially in case things go bad, or if rates spike or your ability to ship is hindered in any way, just make sure you can pivot as needed so that your business can stay functional and run, get the inventory you need, and plan accordingly as far as lead times go, depending on where you're getting in from, what you have to deal with.
I know that specifically right now, if you're bringing in products from overseas and you're dealing with Amazon at this time, it is virtually impossible to do business on Amazon without using a 3PL, third-party logistics. It's impossible because Amazon right now is basically restricting the amount that they're willing to accept because they don't want to be a warehouse. They want to be a fulfillment center. So they give you just enough space, and then you got to use another warehouse. Maybe that warehouse is your backyard, or a garage or whatever. But either way, they don't want to keep it. And that's really, really different than 2019. I can tell you that very much. Really, and it came so abrupt. So I know that it's not just Amazon. It's probably all kinds of different businesses that are being affected by it too. But that one, even though they increased their capacity of fulfillment centers by 50%, I think it was, 50%, they hired an absurd amount of people, something like 400,000 people, or I don't even know. It was some huge number. They still cannot keep up. And just the trend changed considerably. Like 2019 into like mid 2020 was so different in terms of, like, as an Amazon seller, I could tell you right now, it's been unbelievable. and very frustrating and very difficult for a lot of people. I've heard it from a lot of people. So, yeah, I don't know if you have any insight specifically on that, but certainly I could tell you it's a problem.
No, for sure. Warehousing space is definitely in high demand right now. Again, that volume that we talked about with consumer spending spiking. We brought in a lot of inventory as a nation. So, warehouse space is definitely at a premium right now. I can understand why they would be implementing some restrictions in terms of months on hand and the inventory levels they allow you to store with them. That's definitely a big challenge for a lot of shippers. I could imagine in the FBA business, because if they're only telling you, I'm not sure, I'm not very familiar with FBA and what their current rules are. I'm not involved with any, but I can imagine if they're limiting you to only maybe 1 month of inventory on hand, that makes it more challenging because it's not cost effective to perhaps bring in only 1 month of inventory. So you got to put it somewhere. So now you're having added expenses using a 3PL.
Exactly. Profit margins decline. So what do people do? They increase their price so that they can keep their profit margins in line with where they were before. Consumer pays a higher price. Long term, short term, that's okay because the economy gets a boost. But long term, if people are paying more for stuff, now they have less economic growth long term. But in the short term, the GDP is going up. People are buying stuff, but really the prices have increased on that stuff. So it shows up in the GDP as like it's accurate, but like you got to see past just the number, right? That's what I kind of highlight on the channel here. We've got
how much of that spending is subsidized as well.
Oh yeah, and many industries are like that too, right? I popped this question up on the screen. I don't know if you can see that on your end there.
Sellers are thinking prices are coming down soon. Are they? And what does fourth quarter look like?
Yeah, so that's and I'm assuming this is an Amazon question, and prices. I'm assuming she's talking about prices of shipping rates and everything.
Yeah.
So she's talking about moving into fourth quarter, not necessarily in the fourth quarter, just prior to fourth quarter when you would be shipping all your stuff. Do you foresee any decline in price? And thank you, Anna, for the support, by the way. Do you see any decline in price coming at all, or at least the growth stopping at this point?
The short answer, no. Going into the fourth quarter, that's typically the busiest time of the year for importing. It's pre-Chinese New Year volume. Companies getting loaded up for springtime promotions, etc. Holiday spending, of course. A lot of e-commerce stocking up. So fourth quarter is going to be quite bumpy. Rates are probably going to, at the very minimum, stay where they're at.
Okay.
I would expect them to go up.
Yeah. Okay.
Now this isn't going to last forever, but to answer your question in terms of this year and fourth quarter expectations, don't expect them to come down in the fourth quarter.
Jeez, I mean it's crazy how the prices can be so absurd for so long. It's not like, hey, this happened a month later, things come down, we go back to normal. But for so many different products and services and globally all at the same time, where everything is just messed up. And so part of this, I mean, look, we talked about this offline as well. The price of lumber went from, I don't remember where it was prior, but at one point it hit 1,700. And then in a rapid, real short period of time, and then rapidly falls down to 600, around 600 or so. And of course, there's more demand. There's the supply chain problems. There's, the processing of the wood and so on. Yeah, I get that. But part of it, as far as I'm concerned, there's got to be speculation going on behind it. All these different companies are kind of like trying to make their buck, make a quick buck off the ride. But at the same time, I wonder how much of it is just strange behavior going on behind the scenes. And I don't know if you have any insight as to things that people can look for or things that look sort of unusual to you today, other than what we clearly know of with supply chain issues and so on.
So the lumber situation is pretty interesting. Um, it reminds me of the toilet paper situation in 2020. Just as a normal average consumer that was exposed to that just like anybody else. It was pretty amusing. I would just keep in the back of your mind whenever you're thinking about, especially in a speculative nature, just consider where is it coming from? Where's the commodity you're referring to? Where is it actually coming from? Lumber? We're not importing 2x4s or 4x4s from Asia. This is all domestic product in North America. The reason why the spike occurred was because demand went up. People were at home, people were building, people were remodeling. Meanwhile, back to the restrictions and the lockdowns and the supply constrictions, these lumber mills, they just weren't operational for a good period of time. And so that created a little bit of a bubble. And then as soon as capacity got back to normal levels, when restrictions were loosened a little bit, you saw what happened to the price. It just came crashing back down to reality. It's going to find equilibrium eventually.
Right.
That was just a bubble. I mean, that was purely a bubble. Kind of like what's going on in a macro sense with shipping. This isn't going to last forever. Things are going to balance out. But in the shipping industry, at least, this is a very lean operating industry. The container imbalances, that can occur so quickly. It's a very rigid structure, and global supply chain is quite rigid traditionally. And so when you have these massive volatile moves in demand and consumer spending and supply and ability to actually operate that supply chain, the domestic infrastructure is shot. A couple major railways recently halted container shipping from LA, Long Beach, and California to Chicago, inland points. And, it's just, they had to. There was no other choice. Containers were getting stuck in rail yards for months, and they were just getting buried. The congestion it was just getting out of hand. So, but yeah, I would just keep in mind, where is the commodity you're referring to actually coming from? And then that'll help you identify probably whether something's a bubble or whether something's genuinely increasing and expected to stay high.
Right. Okay. We got another one here. Just if there's another government shutdown in October, Coast Guard will add to the fire. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the question is exactly, but is there going to be another government shutdown? I mean, we'll see. Do you think? Let's thank you for the support on that, by the way. Do you think that if there is another government shutdown, lockdowns, and so on, that this is going to then add even more imbalances that we've already seen? Like, it's just going to make things worse, do you think? Or we're kind of at the peak and there's nothing more that can happen?
Never say never, David. It would certainly make things worse. You're going to just take a already constricted system and just choke it even more.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it would just make it a lot worse.
One point that I wanted to make here, maybe we can expand on this, is a lot of the freight that goes air shipping today, a lot of that, 80% of that, from what I've heard, goes through the belly of the planes on commercial airliners. So you're flying from, let's just say, LA to Hawaii. In the belly of that plane, there's actually cargo there, and the cargo is actually taking the precedence over the passengers.
That's right.
And this was obviously disrupted big time when nobody was flying anywhere. So for a long period of time, you had people not going anywhere. That means the cargo now had to go on these limited flights that were still going, or had to take cargo planes. The price skyrocketed dramatically. And I am fully aware of the price difference that happened there. However, today, there's a lot more flights that are going on. My understanding is that the price of air freight has declined, but we are not near the price it was 2019. Could you let me know what you think?
Sure. And no, that's actually absolutely right. It's kind of mind blowing the first time you think about it. You're like, wow, really? Right below my feet in the main cabin, there's a bunch of pallets. But yeah, no, that's absolutely the case. You wonder why baggage fees are so high. It's because that weight is eating into the payload um, bill, the revenue that they get from loading cargo. Because you can only have so much weight on the plane. It seems a little silly that the rates are what they are, but that's essentially why it's a business. And they make a lot of revenue off of the cargo they load in the belly of the planes. Rates, we can expect them to go down in air freight as commercial air traffic picks back up.
Right.
But as soon as there's a restriction, if, let's say, there's a restriction put in place and air traffic is diminished again, those rates for air freight are going to go right back up because now you're limited to the cargo air freighters again, and a lot of lanes where passenger cargo might have been flying.
Interesting. In terms of different types of shipments, if people want to be shipping stuff from overseas, is there anything that's sort of back to the pricing? Obviously not, but is there anything that is, let's say, hasn't escalated any type of shipping, whether we're looking, even like, let's take them all, forget about international, rail, it's coming on a truck, it's coming on air, it's coming on a boat. Have any of those been sort of not seen this crazy ramp up in price, or is every single one much higher than it was 2019?
I mean, that's we're talking about the whole world of shipping right now, all modes, all lanes, all nations. Right. I'm sure there are places where the impact has not been that significant.
So just to interrupt you, like as for the US, if you're either importing or a domestic thing, is there any of those types that really hasn't seen such a spike?
Broadly speaking, no, because once you have, let's say, in one of the most popular trade lanes and import lanes for the U.S., Shanghai, LA, Long Beach, once you see congestion and rates spiking there, as a shipper, you might think, okay, well, let's try pivoting to a different port. Well, the problem with that is everyone else in the country is thinking the exact same thing at the same time. And so that's where I was kind of mentioning the congestion and the ships and vessels idling off the coast of LA Long Beach and then switch over to Oakland, and now the situation is going to return back to LA Long Beach. That's why shippers are rebalancing their inbound supply chains into lane pairings, if they can even. And essentially it goes all over the nation. Several years back, there was a big labor strike at the ports of LA and Long Beach. That created, it was only about 2 or 3 weeks, but that lack of volume and that pretty dramatic shock to a lot of importers, they started diverting cargo to other places, Houston, East Coast, West Coast. And that didn't really return to normal levels once the strike ended for probably 8 months. Anything that typically happens as an issue especially in the ocean freight industry, let's say if an issue persists for a month, you can expect 10 times the amount of time the issue lasted for it to actually normalize. So thinking about what's happened in the shipping industry just over the last 16 months,
right?
Do the math. It's going to be a couple more years at least until we start to see rates come back down to even remotely pre-pandemic levels.
It just doesn't happen overnight, right?
Doesn't. I mean, barring any sort of other dramatic changes in the environment, on a macro sense, that would be the typical recovery time for things to normalize.
Okay. So I would just add, if there is a major deflation that takes place where suddenly demand drops significantly, then maybe that will give it time. So we'll see what happens in the global economy. But I completely understand what you're saying. By the way, everybody watching here, hit that thumbs up for Brendan, please. Not for me. Do it for Brendan. We definitely appreciate his time. I mean, to get the insight, I mean, I always do the charts and the articles. I bring you the deepest details I can, but not only that, I'm actually trying to bring you people on the inside of the industry as well in any way I can. Previously, I've done an interview with a 3D printing company. I've done like all these different interviews. I'm just trying to give you a little bit more depth than just looking at the articles and stuff, which is great. I mean, that's more than what you'll get in the mainstream media, but certainly hearing it directly from people unfiltered is obviously the next level. So once again, Brendan, appreciate your time. I know you can't stay all night. The live chats go on all night, but there's one question here. Rolling Thunder, thank you for the support. He says, are there any companies resorting to smaller boats and unconventional port locations to move critical supplies? Do you have any insight on that?
That's a great question, and absolutely. There are companies out there with very deep pockets and large incentives to get cargo moving despite whatever is going on. So they will find alternative methods to do that. A major headline recently in the industry was that a shipper had leased a vessel, so they chartered an entire vessel at a rate of around $300,000 per day. So that I believe that was around a 4,000 TEU vessel. So that's 4,000 20-foot equivalent units, 2,000 40-foot containers, 4,000 20s. That's a major investment. So, companies aren't doing things like that lightly. I'm sure that thing is going to be under lease for at least 60, 90 days.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a good example. Some companies are definitely taking some dramatic steps to keep cargo flowing at all costs.
Yeah. I mean, on a smaller scale, Amazon sellers, sometimes you right now, especially, normally you would say, okay, this is a 6-week lead time, but maybe now it's 8 weeks, maybe it's even more than that, whatever it is. And at the port, it's going to be there. And then when it gets to Amazon, they're really slow right now. So what do? Well, you start, okay, well, I'll do air shipping. And air shipping, not necessarily new, but maybe unconventional for a lot of people, just because the prices are much higher than what you would pay for sea cargo, and you're just paying this ridiculous price where there goes your margin. Your margin's gone. So I know that problem is being felt on a small scale too, and you just resort to whatever you can do to keep your product in stock so that people buy your product, not the competitors. It's all about the customer loyalty and so on. So you want to make sure you got those products in. So I know small scale all the way up to big, it seems to be an issue.
Yeah, air freight, historically, you could get an import into the U.S. at around maybe $3.50 per kilo. Those rates are now, pushing $30 a kilo easily. So
it's crazy.
Coming down recently, but
right.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary.
Tanker stocks. Thank you, Mickey. Tanker stocks, or stonks, as he says here. But are there companies? You know what? I particularly, I haven't really checked, but I mean, I saw something about Maersk today. Now I didn't pull that one up.
I think their ticker AMKBY, if I remember correctly.
Maersk, there was some news about them today that I just saw. They bought 2 logistics operators, flags more acquisitions. So do you think that this is going to be a continued trend in terms of all the buyouts, the acquisitions? Do you think that will be sort of a trend coming in here, or based on the chaos, like all this chaos you're seeing today, is it going to further consolidate the market, do you think?
So that's a really good question. One would think that, yes, these companies have become very cash rich in the last 16 months. So you would expect them to be making some strategic acquisitions. Mm-hmm. However, on the flip side, there have been a couple articles that have been out recently. So this is all public information, of course, but there have been a couple accusations towards some of these larger steamship lines of collusion. The whole industry is really dominated by 3 alliances that control some 82% of the entire market. So those three alliances, they have an extraordinary amount of power. And some shippers have filed lawsuits citing collusion and
Wow.
profiteering or whatever the legal term is for that, as far as they're concerned. But yeah, no. So there's been some push for government to look into, and a push for the Federal Maritime Commission to look into potential signs or cases of collusion.
Interesting.
It's an interesting development. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But so to answer it, it could really go either way. You would expect the mergers to continue, but given recent articles and everything that's going on, things might be getting a little too hot for some of these companies, and maybe they want to think about what they're doing. I'm not sure. That's a really good question.
We'll keep an eye on it then. Everybody watching, once again, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. We got 430 people in the house. We've had over 3,000 people make their way in. So definitely appreciate that. 277 likes so far. Come on, guys, hit that thumbs up. Don't do it for me. Do it for Brendan. He's sharing his time right here. So thank you for that, as always. And John, thank you for the support. Will air cargo become cheaper than sea? Is that a possibility, do you think?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay.
And you just
both are
gotta
expensive.
You just got to think about the asset that's actually moving the material. You have a plane, that's a lot more expensive to operate. The fuel is a lot more expensive. The space and the weight that you can actually get on it is a lot less. So I don't see a time ever where that might be the case.
Okay. Good stuff. So we've got about 12.
Let me make an exception. It might be cheaper to air freight something from, let's say, Atlanta to Washington, D.C., rather than putting it on a vessel, which you wouldn't do. So that's, I say that jokingly. There really is no practical sense where that would ever happen.
You and I talked about offline. We talked about marinetraffic.com, one resource that I've shown on the channel before, and just to show where kind of the bottlenecks might be, and you could kind of see where cargo, like, with the whole fake trade deal with China and the US, how they were saying that we're going to import this much soy and all this stuff. So we kind of got a sense of where the ships were going to and from, and how many were coming. And it was clear that China started partnering with Brazil. They were purchasing much more soy and other products from Brazil than they were from the US during this whole show of a trade deal. And it was clear, like, you can use some of those resources like marinetraffic.com to do that. But in line with that, and of course, if you have any insight on that, I'd appreciate it. But also, are there certain ports around the United States today that are maybe, typically, you're going to import stuff Shanghai to LA, but maybe now people are going to Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and bringing their stuff in that way to, I know Amazon, Dallas, Fort Worth used to be one of the most popular destinations because they can come in through Texas and then bring it up to Dallas, Fort Worth, and then instead maybe somebody's going around East Coast or something. Like, is any of that type of thing happening at all, or are different ports becoming, let's say, more in demand, or just because there's such a bottleneck coming on the West Coast that they're now shifting over to East Coast?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. It used to be pretty cost effective. It was a good balance of transit time and cost.
Yes.
Bringing goods into the West Coast and then putting them on rails and having them move by rail to the inland point and then offloaded and delivered to the final destination. Even if it was in, let's say, a place like Tennessee, that would still be a cheaper and quicker transit. Nowadays, with so much congestion and the shifting and demand from all the different port pairings, it's pretty brutal. There's definitely some ports that are seeing unprecedented growth because of the shifting, which, of course, they're struggling with their own capacity and ability to meet that new surge in demand. Jacksonville, Savannah, these are places that are really exploding in import volume. Because like you said, there's a lot of shippers that are now diverting cargo from the West Coast because they don't want to get getting stuck for a month at the port and then perhaps stuck for a month at a rail yard somewhere. So there are shippers that are definitely making some strategic changes and adjusting that volume. It's just difficult because again, there's hundreds of thousands of other people thinking and doing the exact same type of pivoting. So it's really difficult.
One of the things that I've been seeing evidence through the data points that I've been bringing up on the channel, and I also speculate as well, has been that businesses today, they see what's going on over the last year and a half. They know there's shortages. They're being told there's more shortages coming, whether it's the semiconductors, whether it's anything. And so as a result, they're saying, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen for the next 6 months or year. So I'm going to buy 2 times the amount, 3 times the amount, 5 times the amount that typically I would buy in inventory. And as a result, a lot of this is kind of like front loading how much they want to hold in inventory, because you didn't need to worry about that in 2019, right? You could do just in time. You could bring your stuff in last minute. It gets on, it's delivered 1 week, give or take, a few days, no problem. Now today that's not the case. So I'm wondering how much of this is people buying next year's inventory now, and so we're just seeing a lot of this being pulled into the present, and then who knows what will happen next year. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, that's a really good observation, and I think there's definitely a lot of merit to that. I believe that is the case for some companies for sure.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, that's something I've been seeing, but I've also been thinking about.
Yeah, no, and that's also going to be one of those additional factors that's driving up that demand for warehousing space.
Yes.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That is definitely something that some shippers are doing.
I think right now, just anybody listening, the 3PL, third-party logistics businesses today are Amazon is basically just giving them money. Like the fact that the demand went up so dramatically on Amazon, and Amazon's basically telling the sellers, do not put your products here, put them at a 3PL, even changing their system, by the way, so they always gave priority to FBA, okay, fulfillment by Amazon. They actually now have made it basically even with fulfillment by merchant and fulfillment by Amazon. So no longer did they give priority to Amazon. At least it was like this last year, where it was clearly distinct that they would actually sometimes give priority to fulfillment by merchant, saying, we're not going to make our fulfillment time, but hopefully you will, so you get the priority. I mean, it's crazy how things have happened. So the 3PLs anyway, not exactly a business that people could start up with a little amount of money, but I think it's going to be huge, at least for the remainder of the year. The demand is there, at least from what I'm seeing.
Makes you wonder, does Amazon know something that we don't? Is there maybe a reason they don't want all that liability right now?
Right. Yeah, something's going on. Something is going on. There's a lot of strange things happening as far as I'm concerned, but we can only speculate, and we can only go based on available data, essentially. And once again, Brendan, at any point you got to walk out, because these live chats, they'll be going until my hair is gray and falls out. So you can, whenever you got to take off, please let us know.
And I love this stuff. I could nerd out about logistics all night, but I hear you.
All right. Now, Osmosis, thank you for the support. What about food? How much are we importing? So total. So I guess we can extrapolate from this that, is there more importing happening today than in 2019? Do you have any insight on that? Is there more imports happening today in terms of food products? Are we talking about like grains coming from overseas? Is that the kind of thing? I'm not 100% sure, but what can you tell us about food imports, if you have any data on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I could give some sort of good insider insight into that, but I'm not really exposed to the food industry or
Okay.
the agricultural markets, so
Okay.
I don't have a whole lot of information I could give on that. Sorry.
What I can give a tidbit on from what I've seen, as I talked about with the fake trade deal, they were talking about importing so much, and soy was one of them, which China did end up buying by the end of the year. They bought a considerable amount of soy, not what they said they would buy, but it was all of these other types of products that were supposed to come out of the U.S., supposed to go to China, and it wasn't even close. So certainly, when you're dealing with agriculture, the public needs to eat, and a lot of that goes, of course, to the livestock. They feed it to the animals, but there's this insatiable demand that seems to be going on, and of course, you're never going to satisfy that because it's going to get consumed at some point. So I just noticed that there was this, what I would call like phantom demand, like China's buying this much, so the farmers, were getting really excited. Oh wow, we're gonna plant all this soy. Oh, and then they didn't buy it, right? It's the subsidies behind it too. Like how much money went into getting these farmers to plant all of these things and everything, and unfortunately, just the demand just wasn't there. So yeah. Anyway, that's just a little bit of information. All right. The Maze King, thank you for the support. Question: in a bipolar world, how will supply chains affect dry bulk companies? What do you think?
Not sure I understand that question.
Okay.
How will supply chains affect dry bulk companies?
I think maybe the supply chain disruptions.
I mean, if you have a commodity that you're shipping that has a limited shelf life, I suppose that added congestion, lack of equipment, increased demand, that I suppose that would definitely have a negative impact potentially on that market. But again, I don't get involved too much in dry bulk shipping. I primarily work with containers.
Okay. All right. Maze King, I hope that was sufficient. If you have any, oh, here we go. China USA split. So he just followed up on that, saying China USA split.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, I guess all I could comment is if you have more demand in one direction, you're going to see an imbalance in the supply and the ability to actually transport those goods. Similar to the container imbalances, you're going to see higher rates in some places because the supply and the demand they're not a good mix or a good match in order for rates to be the same in both directions. You will see an imbalance in vessel operators in a given lane, perhaps, where the trade is not balanced. So that would continue to be an issue. Yeah.
Susan, thank you as always for the support. I appreciate that. And just to 1 second, Bobby said Amazon blocked all U.S. sellers. I was one of them. Certainly not all of them. I could tell you that for sure. I'm not sure if you're having any troubles or whatever. I have a free course if you want to take a look at my course to learn how to stay within their guidelines. Amazon is one of those businesses where if you stay within the borders, you're good. If you go outside, just like the platform we're on right now, you go outside the lines a little bit, they give you a good smack. I'll tell you that right now. And that's not fun. It's not fun. But that's the rules, and unfortunately that's the way it is. But yeah, for sure. See if we have one more question in here. All right. See what we got. And in fact, maybe we'll leave it off with, what do you think people should be like? I cover your typical indicators that you see in the news, just on a little bit of a deeper level, and connect the dots. I think that's what I do differently than a lot of the mainstream. But what do you think people should be paying attention to right now? Like where is like the key, really important stuff, which you would say is important versus where we're looking? If we're looking in this direction, should we be looking in this direction, in terms of, in any aspect? I don't want to put anything on that. If you would just let me know what you think in terms of the shipping industry, freight, domestically, internationally, some interesting information. Anything you've got?
There are so many different events taking place right now that are going to have an impact on the industry. Keep an eye on weather. Right now, China's experiencing a whole lot of issues with a rainy season that's a little bit more intense than expected. The container imbalance, new vessel orders, and when those new vessels are actually going to come online in a couple of years. It's possible that we see rates in a couple of years below what we saw in 2019 and 2018 because of the lack of demand at that point, potentially, given anything that happens with our economy. And with that introduced supply. I mean, there's of course, trade policies that are going into effect. There are other political friction spots that definitely could have a major impact on global economies and logistics, especially. So there's a long list of things to keep in mind right now.
There's not a short list, that's for sure. And then, okay, one last one, quickly. Rolling Thunder, thank you for the support. Do containers have a weight limit? Ship car parts to the U.S. and assemble here? So there's two questions, two-part question there. If you have any insight on that.
Yep, containers absolutely have a weight limit. There's a thing called the SOLAS, Verified Gross Mass Program. Essentially, SOLAS standing for Safety of Lives at Sea. It's essentially an initiative to make sure that these steamship lines know exactly what is on their vessel and in each container in terms of mass, so that they can structure. But I would just Google, container weight limits and cubic meters. It'll tell you everything. It'll tell you, the maximum height, the door height, the internal cubic meter capacity, and especially it'll tell you the weight restrictions. Something to keep in mind, though, when you're looking that information up is, just because you might have a 44,000 pound weight restriction for the payload of a container, that doesn't mean that same container filled to the brim up to 44,000 pounds of goods is going to be legal to transport once it's pulled off that ship. So depending on where you're shipping, certain places have, restrictions over the road for weight limitations for over the road transport. So, you can get overweight permits and deal with things like that. But I would Google that answer because it depends on the equipment type. Size. So.
Awesome. Well, Brendan, I know that everybody here appreciates the insight that you've given today. Really want to thank you for coming on, and not just coming on for an interview, but coming on a live interview. This is the first one I've done lives, which is awesome. Really appreciate your time. I'm wondering if in 6 months, a year down the road, we have a change in sort of what's happening here. If you would come back on, we would definitely appreciate that, to give us a little bit of insight as to what's happening. So I will definitely be following up with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
Awesome. Thank you. Everybody, please say thank you to Brendan. He really appreciates that. Thank you. We got some thank yous and appreciations coming in here. Awesome. Good stuff, guys. Thank you for that.
Guys.
Thank you. So you got to hang up on your end. I'll email you. I will email you.
All right. Sounds good.
We'll talk. Take care.
Thanks for having me on,
Thank you.
dude.
Thank you.
Have a great night, guys. Bye.
To everybody still in here, thank you for coming on in. I'll just stay on for just another 10 minutes or so. Yes, I'm going to leave this one up. Okay, I'm not going to remove this one as I normally would because this is totally different. As you can see, totally different than my normal live video. If you have any questions right now, don't go away. Ask me those questions. I'll try to answer them as best I can. I don't have the experience he does, obviously, but you're welcome to ask any questions at this point. So he contacted me and said, he wanted to talk to me, and I said, hey, why don't we do a live interview? Would you like that? And he said, yes, I would love that. So he just really wanted to share. He's a watcher, viewer, and subscriber of the Money GPS. So I really appreciate his time. I know you did too. It's really good stuff. Really good stuff. Thanks for the great background information. Yes, Sean. Absolutely. Good stuff, guys. I appreciated you saying thank you to him. He took his time out. He took an hour. I told him maybe half an hour you can come on in, and he ended up spending an hour. So I appreciate that. Yes. Yes, Nancy, I agree. Yeah. So this video is going to stay there. You can just view it on YouTube, or you can go to Twitter, Facebook. Like all of them are always permanently on Twitter and Facebook. But normally I would just go unlisted on YouTube because it affects the algorithm. But for this one here, I'm going to leave it up just because it's so important. Just trying to see if there's any questions in here. Inside info. Oh, I forgot to mention that. For Brendan, anybody wants some insight, consulting work, please don't forget. I will post it in the comments and in the description of this video. You can contact him. I will post that in the comments, in the description after this video post. So definitely check it out. I think he's provided us a great service, so I would recommend checking him out. If you have any requirement for consultations, you want to know more, if you just have a question, okay, definitely, no doubt about it, contact him. He's got a lot of information, so I'll put that in the description. So after this one goes live, or I should say posted onto YouTube, I'm going to go in there. I will put his contact information, and you can contact him for yourself. Again, I really appreciate his time coming in here. So we want to support him. And look, if you just have a question to ask him, you can do that as well, right? I'm sure he'll be happy to answer those questions. He took the time out today, and so he'll answer your questions. Don't be shy. He'll help you out, definitely. Hit the like button. Yay, Brendan, thanks. Thank you to Money GPS too. Absolutely. Definite share. Yes. The like button. All right. Good stuff, guys. Okay. All right, everybody. If you don't have any more questions, I'll take off. But you let me know if you've got questions. Don't forget to, if you have any questions directly for Brendan, I will definitely put his information in the comment section description as well. So you definitely want to check him out. For me, I'm looking at the charts. I'm looking at the articles. I'm looking at places like marine traffic. I'm going through searching all these different factors, connecting all the dots together. But certainly I'm not, that's not my business, is not to be dealing with this, consulting for shipping, receiving, and imports and exports. So definitely you want to seek out the person with the proper knowledge, right? Grains, yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, so much of it is subsidized today. So, I mean, it's just, I just don't know. I really don't know. Espresso. Go have an espresso. Yes, yes, yes. I'll take off means another 50 minutes. Bitcoin is going up. Is it? Last time I checked, it was approximately 40,000. Should I buy food? I think everybody should always have some food, some storable food, grow your own food. I think it's really key. No one else is doing this. You're it. You're the proper knowledge. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, I'm just trying to be as informative as I can. I'm trying to bring the next level of information, not just the charts and articles, but bring you into the next level. I don't know what that seems like, a spelling error. I'm not even sure. Do you want to clarify that? I'll give you the screen time. 43K. It may have broken through. So it may be the start of a major uptrend. I gotta take a look. I haven't taken a look at it. If you had stored food just a few months ago, your investment would have already paid off. Yep, 100%. The trolls are in the house. You gotta have a few trolls. Information, I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm not clear. I don't know what you're talking about, but thank you for coming on in. Hit that like button or hit the thumbs down button if you want, if you're feeling that. Bitcoin breakout, yeah. We'll see. I haven't checked it out, but it looked like we were almost there. We were almost there for a big breakout. So it's interesting to see that it moved in that direction. Will the US dollar, so if there's a deflation, you're going to see strength in the US dollar. Some are talking about deflation. In fact, I did an interview today, previous to this, with Lance Roberts from Real Investment Advice, who is literally one of my primary resources. And he talks about inflation, deflation. I asked him, inflation or deflation? And he said, well, both. And so we get into that. And if you see that deflation, the dollars is one that could actually rise, but rise against its peers, not rise against food and energy and so on. So I think that's key. All right. What is this? If you have a show on shipping, why not talk about the truth about shipping? Nope. I don't know. Global currency reset. What I can say is that there's no currency lasts forever, despite what people think right now, because people feel comfortable in the illusion of today. But certainly at some point there's going to be a new currency. What is it going to be? I don't know exactly, but right now there's so much talk about these central bank digital currencies, and also the thought of something backing all of these currencies, where that could be an IMF SDR. It could be a basket of currencies. We could have a new official reserve currency status. Who knows what that's going to be? Maybe it's going to include the Chinese currency in that, which of course, if you have the IMF in there, that's an easy way to approach that. Only time will tell. But what we do know for sure is that we need a crisis to implement it. If we have some major crisis, then that can roll through, right? Until then, there's no good excuse to bring that through, right? All right. David Wong, are you a troll? I don't know. I think you're sarcastic. What is this? Troll use a word proves you're a liar that sold your soul. All right. I don't... Totally sold soul. Can't even read what I wrote. I'm not sure if there's something going on. Maybe I missed something before this. This is strange. Shipping. They run in air as the only fuel. That's a hidden truth. And you call me a troll. They run in air as the only fuel? Can anybody explain this? And then I'm going to go. I don't understand that. Exactly. Okay. All right. I think I figured out what's going on here. All right. All right. This is sillier than the kittens, and we're not allowed to talk about that. All right. Turbines run on air. Oh, okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. Serena, I think I answered that one. I don't know where I am in the chat. Maybe I've missed everything. Ricky, were you here for the hour before? How I showed you information that you literally can't find anywhere else? All right, good stuff. Okay, thank you everybody for coming on in today. Appreciate your time. I'm gonna end it there. This was one really interesting video, this hour of just getting into the insights with somebody who clearly knows what's going on. And I just appreciate his time. I know all of you did as well. So I wanted to thank you for thanking him. And I'm going to end it there. I will have his information in the description and the comments if he feels comfortable with that. I'm gonna talk to him and see. But certainly, if you have any questions, okay, you're interested, just ask him. Just ask him, and then see where it goes from there. But that's about it. I'm going to end it there. I'm going to leave this one live on YouTube so you can check it out for yourself. Check out tomorrow's video that posts in the morning. Going to have a real good stuff for you in the morning, and a lot more to come. That's it. Take care, everyone. See you later.